Want to give a shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. Hey everybody, Matt here from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews. Today I am going to be refreshing a video that I first made a year ago when I practically had nobody on my channel, and that is the going over an awards show format for the best book each year, in my opinion, since 1990. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a year and I'm going to talk about the books that are up for eligibility for it, and I'm going to declare a winner. The first 5 or 6 years of this has a lot of repeats in here because I didn't read it. You know, the closer we get to current, the more books that I've read. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of repeats at the beginning, but the further we go into the awards, the more varied that it's going to get. In general, I'm going to try to limit the nominees to 4 books per year. Sometimes it'll be less if I haven't read 4 books in that year, but sometimes it'll be more if I gave more than 4 5-star reviews. So let us kick this off in 1990, and the nominees are The Eye of the World, Book 1 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, The Great Hunt, Book 2 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, Dreams of Steel, Book 5 of The Black Company by Glenn Cook, and Moving Pictures, Book 10 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett, and the winner is The Great Hunt. I love The Great Hunt. This is my first 5 stars that I gave to a Wheel of Time book. I just thought it was better than the first one in every conceivable way. Just kind of captured my imagination and really started my my love for the Wheel of Time. I'm not the biggest Wheel of Time fan, but I really like it. I very much like most of the books in the series. There's a few that I wasn't a big fan of, but The Great Hunt, just a great book and really started the series. I view this as almost the starting point of what the author was trying to do, because the first book was such a repetitive book on so many past books like Lord of the Rings, and this one just started to become its own thing, and I really cherish it for that. To 1991 now, and the nominees are The Dragon Reborn. This is Book 3 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, Reaper Man, Book 11 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett, and Witches Abroad, Book 12 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And the winner is The Dragon Reborn. We have another one from The Wheel of Time, and yeah, it's again this one I thought was a huge leap from the second one, just like the first was a huge leap from the first one. This one felt like true epic fantasy. The second one was like this journey quest that was going on, a lot of going from point A to point B. This one started to get that sprawling nature of what the Wheel of Time ends up being. Just far more epic in scale. You get so much more delving into these characters, and it's got so many memorable moments that I'll never forget, even though this is an enormous series. I could really point through so many different parts about this book and just got stuck in my brain. And yeah, it's the moment where I was really wowed by this series. I really love the second one, but yeah, this one really, really got me. Then, 1992, the nominees are The Shadow Rising, Book 4 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, Small Gods, Book 13 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett, and Lords of Ladies, Book 14 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And the winner is Small Gods. Finally, we don't have a Wheel of Time winner. Small Gods is my second favorite book from Terry Pratchett. The first one being Guards. This thing is just amazing. It's such a funny book and an insightful book. This is, I've often said that this is a wonderful starting point to Discworld because it's not very overwhelming, because this is kind of a standalone in the universe. It plays on wonderful themes of religion, whether you are religious or you are very much not religious. I think you're going to get an equal enjoyment out of this. It pokes fun at basically everybody involving religion and those who don't believe, and just a wonderful book that I have given to a lot of people, and on those that are religious and those not, and they kind of equally enjoyed it. So that's a feat in and of itself. Then to 1993, and the nominees are Men at Arms. This is Book 15 of Discworld by Pratchett, The Fires of Heaven, Book 5 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and The Last Wish, the first short story collection by first short story collection. I've been saying shory lately for a short story. Apparently, I'm just inventing new words, but maybe that's just my thing. And this is a collection in The Witcher by 𝗂𝐨𝐳 and although I want to give it to The Last Wish to really vary things up, I cannot. And I have to give this one to The Fires of Heaven for a lot of similar reasons. I'm not going to delve in too much of it, but yeah, just continued to elevate the series. I thought this one was better than all of the previous ones. And yeah. So let's go to 1994, and the nominees are Blood of Elves. This is book 1 of The Witcher by 𝗂𝐨𝐳, Soul Music, book 16 of Discworld, Interesting Times, book 17 of Discworld, and Lord of Chaos, book 6 of The Wheel of Time. And the winner for this one is going to be a very predictable Lord of Chaos, and that is going to end for a little while. The winners being a bunch of Wheel of Time books and a bunch of Discworld books, and we're going to finally move on to some more interesting things and vary things up a bit. To 1995. And the nominees for this year are Assassin's Apprentice. This is book 1 of The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. And Masquerade, book 18 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And the winner is Assassin's Apprentice. I really, really like this book. Ultimately, it's one of my least favorite of the books in The Realm of the Elderlings, and that says a lot because I gave this book a very high rating. And that's because Realm of the Elderlings is one of my top 5 favorite series of all time. I thought this book started out so interesting for me. I can get why a lot of people might not like this because it's very slow. It's a big character study, but it's so different than so many of the other books that I read. And the character work in it is so masterful. I mean, Robin Hobb is just a genius when it comes to prose and characters and making you really feel all the feelings. I think you're kind of a heartless person if you don't end up crying in this book, kind of like multiple times. And yeah, it's just wonderful stuff. To 1996, and the nominees for this are Bleak Seasons, book 6 of The Black Company by Glenn Cook, A Game of Thrones, book 1 of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, Feet of Clay, book 19 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett, and Royal Assassin, book 2 of Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. And the winner here is a very easy A Game of Thrones. I like so many people that watch this channel. I'm a huge A Song of Ice and Fire fan, even sticking with it, even though I have no faith that the series is going to get a book 6. But it all started here. And even though I feel like this is not as strong as some of the other ones in the series, there's something special about book 1s in a series that you end up adoring. And because everything just kind of began there. And you just have so many happy feelings about what happened. But even more than that, I can divorce myself from that in this one because there are these epic moments that really set the stage for this series. One very big one, and if you've ever read this book or watched the series, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That happens near the end of this one that just shocked me to no end. Maybe one of the bigger shocks that I've ever had reading a book, and I thought really influenced a lot of fantasy that came after that. Even though it's not the first time something like that has happened, it was one of the most shocking for the dramatic nature of it, I'll say. Moving to 1997, and we have She is the Darkness. This is book 7 of The Black Company by Glenn Cook, Assassin's Quest, book 3 of Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, and Jingo, book 21 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And the winner here is She is the Darkness. As you can see, a lot of nominees here are coming from The Black Company. I'm a huge Black Company fan. I'm not going to go down and say it's top tier fantasy. At the time, it certainly was. This series came out in the 80s and then kind of carried into the 90s. But it's just such a wonderful, dark, grim, dark fantasy that, I don't know that it invented grim, dark fantasy, but it's certainly one of the most popular of the old school grim, dark fantasies. She is the Darkness did so many wonderful things. I mean, this is the point in the series when we're finally kind of getting to the end goal of this series. And we're kind of getting all the characters where they need to be for that final epic quest to begin. And the series starts to get kind of wacky in a good way. You've got a change of narrators happening every couple books, which is such a cool concept that I kind of wish more books pulled off successfully. Certain books have tried it, but this one just works amazing. But you need a masterful writer to be able to pull off that total tonal change, which is what happens here in The Black Company. 1998, and the nominees for this year are A Clash of Kings, Book 2 of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, Ship of Magic, Book 4 of The Realm of the Elderlings, which is Book 1 of the subseries Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb, The Mad Ship, which is the second book in that Live Ship Traders trilogy. Then the final one up for nominee here is The Path of Daggers, Book 8 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And the winner here is A Clash of Kings. I thought A Clash of Kings is superior to A Game of Thrones in every way. No longer do I have to learn about these characters. I know them. I'm intimately familiar with the way that they act and the way that they get along with the other characters. I'm really getting a sense for the dynamics that are going on in this world and that make it all click. The series just continues to expand in scope and scale. The pressure that's going on these characters because of the ending of the first book is just ramped up. At the time that I read this, I'd never read another book quite like this. I've read some since then that have been, in the same realm, but yeah, this thing just blew me away when I read it, and I will forever cherish it. 1999, and the nominees for this year are Gardens of the Moon, Book 1 of 𝐿azin Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson, The Fifth Elephant, Book 24 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett, and Water Sleeps, Book 8 of The Black Company by Glenn Cook. And the winner here is Gardens of the Moon. Gardens of the Moon starts off my favorite series of all time. And I think as I read the book and I rated the book, I really liked it, but I didn't love it. As I finish the series and I go back and reflect upon this book, I come to love it more and more, to the point where I know that when I finally reread this book, it's going to go down as one of my more favorite books from this series. But I was just so dang confused as I was going along it, and that's part of the fun of this. You get thrown into the deep end without any life preserver, and you're told, figure it out, and I'm not going to spoon feed you. And that's a hard thing for a reader that's used to being a little bit more spoon-fed. And I love spoon-fed books too, so don't get me wrong. But this one is the opposite of that. And now that I know everything, and now that, as new characters and themes get introduced in this book, I know everything about them and their end goal and the conclusion to their arcs. It's just awesome. Just awesome stuff. 2000. We're moving into the 2000s. Y2K here. And the nominees are A Storm of Swords, Book 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, Deadhouse Gates, Book 2 of 𝐿azin Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson, Ship of Destiny, Book 6 of Realm of the Elderlings, which is the final book in that Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb, and Soldiers Live. This is Book 9 of The Black Company by Glenn Cook. And this is a really hard one, a really hard one. And because I think that the two books here that are my favorites of this group, A Storm of Swords and Ship of Destiny, are top 10 favorite books for me. But in my first really hard decision, I'm going to have to give this one to A Storm of Swords. It's my favorite book in A Song of Ice and Fire. It just has so many wow moments that even to this day, I can so vividly just imagine. And as I was talking about this book recently on my Discord channel, and if you haven't joined that, click the link down below. I'd love to have you. There's hundreds of people online talking at any given time. It's just a great time. But even more moments got brought up that I kind of forgot about. Like the ending of the book I forgot about. And when it got brought up, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that was also in this book. It's just one of the most action-packed with wow moments of a fantasy book that's ever happened. And I suspect that ever will happen. And yeah, I recently put out a video a few days ago that, depending on how long it takes me to edit this one, as the time of filming this, it was released today, that went over your top favorite fantasy books on a huge survey that I did, and the number one was A Storm of Swords. Moving to 2001, and we have Grave Peril. This is Book 3 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. The Last Hero, Book 27 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Memories of Ice, Book 3 of 𝐿azin Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson, and American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And the winner here is a very easy Memories of Ice. Memories of Ice is a top 3 𝐿azin Book of the Fallen book for me, right up there. I'll go over the next two when I get to them later. And It's just amazing. This is the book when everybody tells you that you're not going to know for sure if you love 𝐿𝐴ZM or not until you finish this one. And the reason they tell you that is because of how wonderful this book is. It just sets the stage for the next one to come and blow you out of the water as well. It's got two huge, it's got a middle, finale and then an ending finale, and they're both incredible. It had me quite literally sweating in fear for these characters. It had me laughing out loud. It had me crying. It had all of the range of emotions that I would ever feel in a book were evident here in Memories of Ice. 2002. And the nominees for this year are Fool's Errand. This is book 7 of Realm of the Elderlings, which is the first book in the next sub-series here, Tawny Man by Robin Hobb. House of Chains, book 4 of 𝐿𝐴ZM Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. Night Watch, which is book 29 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And Summer Night. This is book 4 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. And the winner here goes to House of Chains. This is a book that is one of the least favorite for 𝐿𝐴ZM fans, and somehow one of my favorites. And I think there's a lot of elements here that people are down on. Mostly the first, big chunk of the book does this totally different thing where this book is a multi-POV, an extreme multi-POV story. There are literally hundreds of POV characters, and it is constantly swapping. In a given chapter, you're going to have, paragraphs from one character and then paragraphs from another, and it's just rapid changing. But the whole first part of this book follows one character, and it's very off-putting for a lot of people. And this character is a horrible person. So it's hard to have empathy for this character and kind of follow along, which I think brings a lot of people down. But I love this character, even though this character is a horrible person, and it made my enjoyment of it kind of the opposite that a lot of people end up feeling. 2003. The nominees here are Crossroads of Twilight. This is book 10 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Death Masks, book 5 of The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Fool's Fate, book 9 of Realm of the Elderlings, which is book 3 of that sub-series of Tawny Man by Robin Hobb. And Monstrous Regiment, book 31 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And the winner here is Fool's Fate. I love this thing. Can't really say a lot about this book without spoiling much, but the Tawny Man series, it's such a slow series. I mean, the first book had this extremely large amount of time taking place in a one-bedroom little cabin, and nothing happens other than just talking to another character. And by the end of that book, you get a kind of conclusion to the story. In the second one, you're like, where are we going? In the second one, not a lot happens. But it's all really a setup for this third one, where everything happens. And everything that you went through kind of gets concluded in these major moments that will stick in my memory forever. If you've read it, it's probably going to stick in your memory forever. And, it's one of those things where when the plot was kind of getting set up, I was like, oh man, I hope they do X. And then when they go and do X, it's just a mind-blowing experience. Moving on to 2004. And the nominees for this year are Going Postal, book 32 of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Midnight Tides, book 5 of 𝐿𝐴ZM Book of the Fallen by Erikson. Knight of Knives, book 1 of Novels of the 𝐿𝐴ZM Empire by Ian C. Esselmont. And The Healthy Dead, book 2 of The Tales of 𝗏𝗁𝐿𝐴𝐴 and Coral Roach by Steven Erikson. And the winner is Midnight Tides. And I hate to keep giving these things out to 𝐿𝐴ZM books, but it's my favorite series, and this is my video, and I'm going to do whatever I want. It's just, this book is crazy good. I think it's the best individual storyline, most cohesive storyline out of any of the 10. It did this crazy thing that only Steven Erikson can do, where, you've got 4 huge books talking about these main storylines and where we're going, and then the 5th book comes along and it says, you know what, toss all that out. We're going to tell a new story in a new continent with none of the same characters, and trust me, it'll tie in later. And that's crazy. That takes so much guts, so much planning to be able to pull this off. And thankfully, I loved all the characters. And one of my favorite characters, this character Bug, one of my favorite characters of all time, and my favorite in this series, shows up in this book. And so that's a cool thing. 2005. The nominees for this year are A Feast for Crows. This is book 4 of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Deadbeat, Book 7 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, and Knife of Dreams, Book 11 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And the winner of this, probably a little bit controversially, is going to be Knife of Dreams. This book is awesome. And, it's in part awesome because it's the last book written by Robert Jordan. Robert Jordan very sadly passed away after this book, and the series had to be picked up by Brandon Sanderson, which kind of launched Brandon Sanderson into the stratosphere for fantasy fans. And it also takes the 3 books before this, which everyone calls the slog because they're much slower in pace, and it concludes all their storylines. And not like all of them, but it felt like all of those were a prequel for this story. So this one was awesome. And it just finally alleviated that sense of stress that I was going through. Like, am I going to like this series? Am I going to push through? Why do I push through? And then this happened. It's like, here's why. Let's move on. The series rocks again. 2006, and the nominees are a new entrant into this, The Blade Itself. This is Book 1 of The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. The Bone Hunters, Book 6 of 𝐿azyn Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. The Final Empire, Book 1 of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. And The Lies of Locke Lamora, Book 1 of Gentleman Bastard by Scott Lynch. And this is the hardest year that I've had to decide because all of these books are top tier for me. But the winner has to be The Lies of Locke Lamora, a book that I just finished doing a reread of. And I did my first buddy read on my Discord channel where we had a couple dozen people reading through this and talking about it chapter by chapter. It was a great experience. I love everything about this book from beginning to end. I love this fun heist story. I love these amazing characters. I love the dark elements of this book. I love the gritty way they talk. I love the surprises. And more than anything, I love the audiobook narration that's done here. It's just perfection and really elevates everything about this book into the top tier of fantasy books. 2007, and the nominees here are Before They Are Hanged. This is Book 2 of The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. The Lees of Laughter's End. This is Book 3 of The Tales of Botch Lane and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 by Steven Erikson. The Name of the Wind, Book 1 of Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. And Reaper's Gale, Book 7 of 𝐿azyn Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. And the winner here is Reaper's Gale. Reaper's Gale is a continuation of that storyline that happened in Book 5. It rocks. It's super fun. And it's almost like you can look at these two books as, a duology. Even though more things happens in that world, this one just takes everything that happened in that Book 5 and just wraps it all up in the most untidy of bows at the end of this one. And yeah, it's just, I love the world. I love the continent that's being explored here. And another one where I feel a lot of people are kind of lower on this one. I don't really quite get why, because I couldn't be higher. Well, I mean, I could, but you know what I mean. 2008. The nominees here are The Hero of Ages. This is Book 3 of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. The Last Argument of Kings, Book 3 of The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. Return of the Crimson Guard, Book 2 of Novels of the 𝐿azyn Empire by Ian C. Esselmont. And Toll the Hounds, Book 8 of 𝐿azyn Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. And you may think that the winner here is going to be another 𝐿azyn book, but it is not. It is The Last Argument of Kings. The First Law, as of the time of filming this, is my second favorite series that I've ever read. And this is my favorite book in that series. I've said this a lot, but it really felt like the first 2 books in this were big, huge, long prequel. Because finally, the action is just ridiculous in this book. The epic moments blow my mind. The very ending of this, I just couldn't comprehend that was what was going to happen, that the revelations about one of these characters were the truth. And it was like one of those wow moments, and a moment when I've said, I get wowed a lot by a lot of endings, but this one was the one where I went, that was not the tone, that was not the feeling I thought I'd be getting evoked by a twist, and that's special in its own right. I love to be surprised, and this one really did. 2009. The nominees here are 𝗂𝘗𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐵. This is book 2 of 𝗟𝗏 Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. Dust of Dreams, book 9 of 𝐒𝐿azin Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson. And The Gathering Storm, book 12 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. This is that one where Brandon Sanderson wrote it off from Robert Jordan's notes. And the winner is going to be The Gathering Storm. Not only do I love this thing for the skill that it took Sanderson to take a beloved series and do a wonderful job using the same tone, using the same writing voice. But I thought it elevated. I thought it was the best Wheel of Time book out of all of them up to that point. Because I think Sanderson's just a better writer than Robert Jordan. He's more succinct, which is important sometimes. I criticize Sanderson sometimes for writing like too much. But Jordan does that to an extreme. He'll take these non-important elements going on in a story and just talk about them forever. Sanderson was able to say, like, look, we have to get to the ending here. Let's go boom, 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 start checking things off the checklist and start marching to a conclusion. And the planning that Sanderson's able to do really showed off in this book. 2010. The nominees here are The Black Prism. This is book 1 of Lightbringer by Brent Weeks, a new series added to this awards show. Stonewielder, book 3 of Novels of the Malazan Empire by 𝐿_ce 𝐿𝐼𝐻. Towers of Midnight, book 13 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And a book you maybe have never heard of, and this is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 1 of Stormlight Archive. And the winner of this is The Way of Kings. And this book is awesome. This book reignited my love for fantasy after a long hiatus that I took after I read A Song of Ice and Fire. Many years went by, and I picked this one up on a whim, and my mind was blown. And it's like, wow, this is what modern fantasy is? What have I been doing? I should read more. I should start a YouTube channel, and that all got kicked off because of Brandon Sanderson. And just the ability to plot out in such detail, to be able to get things to a point when everything would kind of come together, and it would feel like all this plotting and all these things were all carefully crafted so that the characters would get where they need to be to have these magical moments happen. The growth of these characters, I find Sanderson's character work is not the greatest at times, but I do like a lot of these characters, and in some parts, nostalgia plays a big part in this, and it will again when I reread this book, because of all the things that I just said. Moving on to 2011, and the nominees here are The Crippled God, book 10 of 𝐒𝐿azin Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson, A Dance with Dragons, book 5 of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, 𝗓𝑚𝐿, book 6 of 𝗟𝗏 Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan, and The Wise Man's Fear, book 2 of Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. And the winner here is The Crippled God. That's easy because it's my favorite book that I've ever read. I just took this wonderful series that I've talked so long about today on this video and just concluded it in the most epic, magical, wonderful, compassionate, thoughtful, perfect way that I could ever imagine a series ending. And not just the ending. These moments get brought up from these characters that I thought were almost like side characters to be equally cool and equally important to the series. And just the ability to take characters in the final book in a series and say, yeah, let's tell their story now. Let's do a new thing is just crazy. And only Stephen Erickson could do that. 2012. And the nominees here are Orbscepter Throne, book 4 of Novels of the Malazan Empire by 𝐿_ce 𝐿𝐼𝐻. Malice, book 1 of The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. The Blinding Knife, book 2 of Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. And The Worms of Blearmouth, book 5 of the Tales of Botchlane and 𝗏𝗏 by Stephen Erickson. And the winner here is a first-time winner here in the series, Orbscepter Throne. And so 𝐿_ce 𝐿𝐼𝐻 is the co-writer of 𝐒𝐿azin. They each write different series within the world of 𝐒𝐿azin. And, while I do not enjoy 𝐿𝐼𝐻's books as much, that doesn't mean that I don't like his books. I love his books. I just like Erickson's a little more. And this one's just great. It's It's not my favorite of his books in the series, but it's the first one that's going to win because the other ones were going up against harder competition. Nothing against these books, but yeah, this one had an easier go of things. And yeah, Orbscepter Throne brings back a lot of characters that I previously got to love and cherish from the other series, which is such a cool thing. I mean, the other books in this series that he did were like these kind of some side characters and doing, going off and doing this other thing. But this one said like, hey, let's take the ending of one of Erickson's books and extend it. And that's cool and awesome, and I couldn't get enough of it. Then for 2013, the nominees here are A Memory of Light, Book 14 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, Blood of Dragons, Book 13 of Realm of the Elderlings, which is Book 4 of the Rainwild Chronicles, Promise of Blood, Book 1 of The Powder Mage by Brian McClellan, and The Rose and the Thorn, Book 2 of The R'yr Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. And the winner here is A Memory of Light. I'm a sucker for good endings to series, and this is the final book in a 14-book series, and it didn't fumble things. It didn't even do mediocre. It did wonderful. It had like probably the largest chapter that I've ever read, the largest battle that I've ever read about in a series. It ended things in such a good way that it just, I could see some people reading that ending and feeling unsatisfied. I read it and felt extremely satisfied. It's such a hard thing to be able to end a series that goes on for so long. And it was just a masterful job by Sanderson and a masterful job by Robert Jordan to plot things out and to finally set the stage for Sanderson to knock this one directly out of the park. 2014, the nominees here are Fool's Assassin. This is book 14 of The Realm of the Elderlings, which is book 1 of the final sub-series, Fitz and the Fool by Robin Hobb. The Crimson Campaign, this is book 2 of The Powder Mage by Brian McClellan. Valor, book 2 of The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. And Words of Radiance, book 2 of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. And the winner here is a relatively easy Words of Radiance. The Words of Radiance is my favorite book from Stormlight Archive. The Stormlight Archive is one of my favorite series, so that says a lot about this book. I've said this again. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The first book was a lot of setup. And I love a book that is able... I just love book 2s so much. I love final books, and I love book 2s. And I love book 1. I just like books. Is that what I'm finding out about myself? I just like books. But what I like about book 2 so much is that you no longer need that setup. And, I love the character... Shallan, I don't know. I read the books. I didn't listen to it. I found out after doing my series that I just finished up on your favorite books that this character is very much detested by a lot of people, which I can understand why. But I love this character. I think she's a very, very well done woman character. I loved hearing her backstory. I was fascinated by it. I love so much about this character, and to get a book that really focuses on this character is just awesome stuff for me. 2015. The nominees here are Fool's Quest, book 15 in Realm of the Elderlings, the second to final book in that series by Robin Hobb. The Grey Bastards, book 1 of The Lotlands by Jonathan French. Ruin, book 3 of The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. And The Grace of Kings, book 1 of The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. And the winner is The Grace of Kings. This is a book that I recently got done reading, and I feel like, as of this video, it's my second favorite book that I've ever read after The Crippled God. It did this amazing retelling of the founding of the Han Dynasty from ancient China. And a story that I did not know, and so that thoroughly increased my enjoyment here because I didn't know any of the plot points. The pace of this book can only be described as frantic. It is like leaping from big moment to big moment. It feels like a combination of a history book and a fantasy book, two genres that I thoroughly love. It took everything about a history book and made it fun and exciting. And that's just awesome. And this book, more than anything, is like the history of the world. And then as the next 3 books come along, it's like, now we're going to tell the story. But that history of the world is a style of fantasy book that I've never read before this one. And I hope someday more authors try to do what was accomplished here by Ken Liu. So Going forward, I've got a lot of 5-star reviews for books in these years, so we're going to have a lot of nominees from here on out, so bear with me. 2016, the nominees are Age of Myth, Book 1 of the Legends of the First Empire, which is part of the Greater Raiura universe by Michael J. Sullivan. Soulsmith, Book 2 of Cradle by Will White. The Autumn Republic, Book 3 of The Powder Mage by Brian McClellan. The Forgetting Moon, Book 1 of The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. The Rage of Dragons, Book 1 of The Burning by Evan Winter. The Wall of Storms, Book 2 of The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. And Wrath, Book 4 of The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. And this is really, really hard because a large handful of these books, I could easily interchangeably put these in. But I'm going to give the winner to Wrath. It's a great ending. It's a great ending to an all-time favorite of mine. The battles that happen here are just so incredible. They're the best battle sequences that I've ever read about in my life, through any genre. They're just so well realized, so well written that I can just, even today, it's been many months since I read this book, I can just picture myself there in every single thing that happened, even though it's been a long time since I read it. It's so vivid and amazing, and it caps up this story in, somewhat of a predictable way, but a way that I needed to happen. Sometimes you need that ending to happen. I got it, and I loved it. 2017, the nominees here are Assassin's Fate, the final book of the Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. Black Flame, Book 3 of Cradle by Will White. Dead House Landing, Book 2 of The Path to Ascendancy by 𝗟𝐸 𝐿𝐸. Jade City, Book 1 of the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Kings of the Wild, Book 1 of The Band by Nicholas Eames. Mother of Learning, Arc 2 by 𝗏𝗏 𝐿𝐸. And Skysworn, Book 4 of Cradle by Will White. And the winner here is Assassin's Fate. Again, I love good endings, and this ending rocked. This ending did something that I didn't think possible, and that it took these different storylines that had been going on and kind of ending throughout the series, because that's what this book does. That's what the series does, is it tells these little stories that aren't necessarily all perfectly interconnected, but they have to do with the wider world, but they are their own thing. And then it went back and connected them all. And I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how it's possible from a series that was never intended to be written. Robin Hobb originally had the series ending much before this final subseries, and then she wrote it. So it wasn't planned out, but then she was able to come through and just perfectly weave this tapestry together. Good job, Robin Hobb. 2018, the nominees here are Bloody Rose, Book 2 of The Band by Nicholas Eames. Empire of Silence, Book 1 of Sun Eater by Christopher Rocchio. The Wandering Inn, Volume 1 by 𝗏𝗏. The Wolf, Book 1 of Under the Northern Sky by Leo Carew. And Mother of Learning, Arc 3 by 𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏. And the winner here is The Wolf. The Wolf was a book that was not on my radar up until a month ago, when it won the Patreon raffle pick. So on my Patreon channel, if you remember, you get to put a book or two into the raffle, and I spin the wheel every month, and whatever wins, I have to read, and I have to review it. And a lot of times I'm nervous about that because I don't know anything about these books. And it won, and I was like, oh man, what am I getting into here? Instantly, I was in love. It's such an amazing story of this character who has to lead a nation that he did not ask for. He's trying to stop a civil war from happening. He's trying to stop an invasion from happening. And it just has so many awesome A Song of Ice and Fire vibes to the political nature of this, and just rocks in every conceivable way. 2019, the nominees here are A Little Hatred. This is Book 1 of The Age of Madness, which is the First Law Universe by Joe Abercrombie. A Time of Blood, Book 2 of Blood and Bone by John Gwynne. Fae and Fair, Book 2 of The Wandering Inn by 𝗏𝗏. Jade War, which is Book 2 of The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Kellanved's Reach, Book 3 of The Path to Ascendancy by 𝗟𝐸 𝐿𝐸. 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City, Book 1 of The Siege by K.J. Parker. The Blackest Heart, Book 2 of The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. The Howling Dark, Book 2 of Sun Eater by Christopher Rocchio. The Bone Ships, Book 1 of The Tide Child by R.J. Barker. Underlord, Book 6 of Cradle by Will White. And Uncrowned, Book 7 in Cradle That's a lot. Man, a lot of 5-star reads for that year. But the winner here is The Howling Dark. And it's hard. There's a few here that I could argue to be ahead of this one, but The Howling Dark gets it. And I don't think this is recency bias because I just finished reading this recently. But it's amazing. I don't cry a lot in books. I definitely bawled in this one. It brought these it really made me fall in love, I think, with sci-fi again. I don't know if I'm like fully in love with sci-fi again, but it reignited my passion for it. Because this is it's a fantasy sci-fi blend, or sci-fantasy, I think is the name for it. And yeah, just incredible concepts, incredible writing. Christopher Ruocchio is just a god of literature. And I hope that he blows up and gets the exposure that he very much deserves in the future. 2020, we're almost done. The nominees here are A Time of Courage, Book 3 of Blood and Bone by John Gwynne, Call of the Bone Ships, Book 2 of The Tide Child by R.J. Barker, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman, Flowers of Eshselm, Book 3 of The Wandering Inn by Pirate Abba, How to Rule an Empire and Get Away with It, Book 2 of The Siege by R.J. Barker, Rhythm of War, Book 4 of The Strommeyer Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and The Trouble with Peace, Book 2 of The Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie. And the winner here is Call of the Bone Ships, a book that I think is one of the more underrated books that I've ever read. This series is underrated. This author is underrated. And it's just awesome. I am admittedly a sucker for nautical books. And this book series almost all takes place on a boat or multiple boats. And so that's just going to hook me right away. But the writing here is so good. I love a good pirate tale. And this is kind of, they're not called pirates, but they're pirates. And yeah, it's so well written. I mean, R.J. Barker. Those guys need to come together and figure out something different so I can differentiate them better. It's just so good. And the characters here are amazing in every way. Single thing that I would classify as a rating category for a book, this one gets a 5 out of 5 in it. The characters, the writing, the story, the world building, the magic, everything it's perfect. 2021, the nominees here are Bloodline, Book 9 of Cradle by Will White, Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff, Jade Legacy, which is Book 3 of the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, Reaper, Book 10 of Cradle by Will White, The Bone Ship's Wake by R.J. Barker, that's Book 3 of The Tide Child, The Last Light, Book 5 of The Wandering Inn by Pirate Abba, The Shadow of the Gods, Book 1 of the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne, The Veiled Throne, Book 3 of the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, The Wisdom of Crowds, Book 3 of The Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie, and the winner here is The Last Light. Now, I am such a big Wandering Inn fan. I feel like I'm the only booktuber talking about The Wandering Inn. I feel like more people need to read this series, but it's intimidating because it's the longest fantasy series of all time, and it is being written at a faster speed than any other author is putting out works. And so it's intense and overwhelming. I get it. But just to bite the bullet and say, let me just, not have any intent to catch up, but let me just dive in. It's an amazing experience that there's no other book series that I've ever read that's like it. It's this progression fantasy lit RPG that feels like it shouldn't work, but it does. It's just like the biggest, most well-realized world that I've ever read, and just gets better and better as it goes along. And this one features some characters that are going to stick with me forever. 2022, the nominees here are The Hunger of the Gods, Book 2 of the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne, On Lavender Tides, Book 1 of 𝗟𝗄 by Travis Riddle, The Justice of Kings, which is Book 1 of Empire of the Wolf by Richard Swan, and The Lonesome Crown, Book 3 of The Five Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee, and the winner here is The Lonesome Crown. When I said earlier that The Tide Child is one of the most underrated book series of all time, this one is. It's criminally underrated. This is a must-read if you like grimdark. Brian Lee Durfee is a fellow booktuber, and I don't put any bias into that when I'm saying that I love these books. I just love the writing, and I love the story. It all kind of comes together in this final one. It's dark, it's brutal, it's everything that I needed from a book, and you gotta go read it. And finally, we're going to give an award for 2023, even though we're only half done, but I reserve the right to change this later on. And the nominees here are Gods of the Weirdwood, Book 1 of the Forsaken Trilogy by R.J. Barker, The Captain, Book 1 of The Last Horizon by Will White, The 11th cycle, which is book 1 of Mistland by Kian Ardalan, and Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And the winner is The Captain. I love The Captain so much. It's so different than the other books that I read in the Cradle series by Will White. I thought Will White fumbled the final 2 books in the Cradle series, but in my mind, he didn't fumble them because he turned into a bad writer. He fumbled those books because the plot just kind of got away from him. But man, he's good. I found The Captain to be the best book that I ever read by Will White, which is one of my more controversial opinions that I have. And everybody gets mad when I say that, but it's what I feel. This book, where Cradle was a progression fantasy where characters start at 0 and end up at 100, The Captain, the character starts at 100 and stays there. It's just fun. It's a different type of book. Everybody's just so overpowered, so are the enemies, but it's just a blast. So that wraps up this extremely long video. I need to go grab some water because I cannot talk anymore. And so yeah, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for watching this extremely long video. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Jen B, Harry B, Jamie, Jeff Pixler, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.